Let's do something else with the Bayer case before we make conclusions about it. Let's go back to our framework for moral reasoning. And the reason I do this, and I keep doing it, is that this is the most important element of this course. When you leave this course, you're not going to remember all the ethical theories. You're not going to remember all the cases. But what I would really like you to remember is the ethical decision-making process. And the reason is you're going to get into some tight spots. You're going to face some ethical decisions. I know that. I don't know what they are, though. I can't predict. And if you can just sit down for 5 minutes, or maybe 10 minutes, but 5, and go through these steps, sometimes it helps you think through the case. And sometimes it helps you also be defending your position to your other managers. And that's important, or to your team. It's very important to be able to do that, because you're going to have to do that a lot. And sometimes you can convince companies to change the way they're doing things as a result. We saw that in the Merck case, where the head researcher said, look, we just have to do this. This is critical. All these people and their illness is at stake. And by having strong arguments, he was able to convince the whole company to engage in the process of developing this drug. And he didn't do it by just saying, I think we ought to do that. He did it by very clear, rational decision making. So that's why you're going to get tired of me doing this. But what I really want is that's the takeaway from the course. If you don't remember anything else, this is what I'd like you to do. Remember. Now let's look again at Bayer crop science. We know what the facts are. We know something about the culture in India. We don't probably know enough, except for those of you who are from India, and you know a lot. But we do know there's this ancient tradition of using child labor in the farms. And it's partly because of poverty, and it's part because sometimes people are too poor to get other laborers, and it's partly driven by custom. But it's so ingrained. And think about habits you have that are ingrained. It's so hard to get rid of them. That isn't bad. It's just that some of our habits are good, like getting up in the morning, brushing your teeth. I mean, they're little stuff. This really works pretty well. But we have to think about our habits. And this is and in a culture, we also want to examine the habits and the practices to see how good they are and how well they work. So this is what this case is trying to do. Now we saw the issues. Should they go ahead and forget this, just block it out, pretend they don't notice their child labor? But then what about the morale and the publicity? Bad. Should they sell it? Well, then they've got the cottonseed problem, right? And they're going to buy from another company. There's no guarantee they don't have child labor. In fact, there's probably a guarantee they do. So, and then there's the power dynamics. This is a huge company. It's gigantic, multi-billion-dollar company. Been in India for years. It could just say, we're not going to use child labor here. Whoa. But then how does that look? Big company bossing around a bunch of little farmers. They don't like it. I don't think Bayer likes it either. Most companies really don't want to do that, even though they do sometimes, as you know. So they could do that. Now, we saw a standard stakeholder in that map. Then I changed it by putting the children in the middle, because I wanted us to focus on them as stakeholders. They're the issue here. Of all the issues in this case, the child labor is the issue. So we know what the alternatives are. Sell it, make a deal with the farmers not to hire children. And then what kind of deal? Pay a premium? How can Bayer crop science respect those farmers, avoid child labor, and not appear as neocolonialists? Very difficult, but we'll see how they do. And then these are the problems. Selling crop science doesn't help children at all. Selling does affect Bayer's bottom line negatively. Cottonseeds are important. Price is important. Indian farmers benefit from working with crop science. They're great. It works really well together. And the genetically modified seeds, however you think about those, work very, very well. And the Indian children, of course, are the stakeholders. What about children's rights to education? In India, education is supposed to be global. Every child is supposed to have a right to education. It's supposed to be free at the government schools. But as you see, and it happens in every country, in fact, some children get left out for various reasons, not always bad reasons, but that's what happens. So then how do you choose? You can use a principal approach. Does this pass the mirror test? Can Bayer look themselves in the eye and say, oh, this is fine, they have child labor, right? Then we ask, and then what would the best company do, the most ethical company do? And will it stand the test of time? Bayer's mission to never have child labor is something they want to go on forever. And then who is harmed and who is benefited? Well, we've looked at that. And how do we prioritize? Can we prioritize the interests of those children? And then does it violate any moral minimums? I think the right to an education is something everyone has. And so those are what rights are at stake, very serious rights at stake. And then how does this action fit with local culture? That's a real challenge. And then how do we be fair to the Indian? We must be fair to those Indian farmers. We must be fair to the company, and we must be fair to their mission. And how is this going to be transparent? It is transparent. Everybody knows about this, by the way. Companies that try to hide things, that's crazy. It doesn't work. We'll see that in the Volkswagen case. They tried to hide things that, guess what, got found out. So there's no point in trying because everybody finds out everything these days in the media. So there are no secrets. Even personal secrets. So, give it up. And then what kind of virtue, what kind of company is this? And then the question about legality. Is this legal to have child labor? And actually, interestingly, in India, in many of the states, India has states, it is not legal to use child labor. However, because India is so big, it's virtually impossible to enforce. So in some of the states where there are Indian farmers using child labor, it's illegal. In some, it isn't. However, enforcing that is a really big challenge, and the Indian government admits that. What values are at stake here? Obvious, Bayer's mission statement, the value of the cotton seeds, the respect for the farmers and their tradition, the rights of owners to get a return on their investment, the right of Indian children for decent education, and then the consequences for each stakeholder. So now we're left. What should Bayer do? I want you to think creatively about the options, and in the next module, we'll see exactly what Bayer did.